My honest opinion on the Gyökeres situation is that there are clear pros and cons to this player, and there are also major pros and cons to Sesko. Even though Sesko was the player that we went for, which I think ultimately the reason why we went for Sesko over Gyökeres in the beginning was that Sesko is younger, and Arsenal do have a lot of faith in Havertz, and Sesko has the higher ceiling. So Arsenal were going to go in that direction, use Havertz as they've been using him, and then kind of ease Sesko into the fold with the idea that he was going to be, his potential would mean that he would be something special in the next 2 to 3 seasons, right? It's a raw player that has a lot of potential. And so we're leaning heavily on potential here. But it's not a perfect signing by any stretch of the imagination. Our perfect signing was Isak. Make no mistake about it. The number one choice over the last 2 seasons or last 2 summers was Isak. Arsenal were waiting to see whether or not Newcastle made it into top 4 and see if he would shake loose, but he didn't. So our next 2 options were Sesko and Gyökeres. So I need people to be honest about, it's not that Sesko is the number one option and that's the one that Arteta wanted. They had 2 options that they were okay with going with, because the reality is if Arteta was not happy with Gyökeres at all, and he doesn't want the player, we would not be getting him. We'd be getting Ollie Watkins or something like that. He wouldn't even be on the list. Arteta's comfortable enough with the player for him to be on the list. Go for Sesko first. That didn't work out. We were simultaneously working on Gyökeres. We fired on that one because Sesko we've been priced out of the Sesko deal. Speaking on the Sesko thing really quickly, anybody who felt like Sesko was such a perfect option or such a slam dunk that we should have been paying 90 million for him, which is what's come out from the Slovenian media this morning, is that they feel like his valuation is 90 million. You are smoking crack. There is no way that any Arsenal fan, no matter how much they like Sesko, should be advocating for Arsenal to bend over and give RB Leipzig 90 million for Sesko. And this is coming from somebody that really rates Sesko. He would have been the option I would have went for first as well. I agree with the fact that, or the idea that Sesko could become something really special in the future, but we are very much so heavily banking on potential here. There is nothing that he's done up until this point, not the 100 goals that he scored as a 21-year-old, none of that justifies a 90-something million, price tag. And it's prohibitive to the rest of our window. You buy Sesko, you're not talking about Rodrigo's and Eze's and shit. You're talking about that's all you're getting. So you're talking about buying somebody raw, that, kind of unproven, that is all about the potential and what we think he will be for 90 million. Anybody advocating for that, I just feel like is delusional. It makes no sense. The 60 million that we were looking for makes a lot more sense for a player of his level. He is not as refined as Ekitike, who's a player that I like, but I don't think fit us as well. I think he's more of a tall Jesus. If we're trying to get a traditional 9, Ekitike doesn't really work for that. But Ekitike is in the same league, is more refined, and is going for like 80 something. The Sesko kind of 60 something, 60 to 70 million makes a lot more sense than 90. Let's be honest. So anybody advocating for that, I feel like, is just advocating for just get Sesko, like, oh, he's the potential. Like, come on. I get that there's fears of this becoming another Isak, but the reality is 90 million is ridiculous. Just doesn't make any sense for us at all in a window where we need to get at least 5 signings, signings that actually change us, and make us better, So I just want to put that out there, that as much as I like Sesko, the price is prohibitive and ridiculous, and we shouldn't be bending over, at all whatsoever. Going back to Gyökeres, there are clear pros and cons of this player. I'm not like somebody that's going to sit here and just say, well, he banged in 100 goals in Portugal, so it's just going to translate, or it's just that simple. I've said multiple times that I do think that we're going to have to change or tweak things to get the best out of this player, and that there is something in the back of my mind that's a little bit worried about the level of the Portuguese league and how that's going to translate to the Prem. That being said, I don't think the drop off will be anywhere near the catastrophizing that people have done. He's only going to score 10 goals. He's not going to be able to to take Havertz's spot. That those types of things. The project is over if we buy him. It's all done. Oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever. I don't think it's that. I think what we're actually talking about is it going to be the case that he's going to be more of is he going to be one of the best strikers in the league, giving us 20, 25 goals in the season? Or is he going to be more of like a 15 goals? Are we talking about Isak numbers? Or are we talking about Ollie Watkins numbers? What are we talking about here? And that there's no way Gyökeres is coming to Arsenal and scoring less than Havertz in the 9. There's no way Victor Gyökeres is coming to Arsenal and scoring less goals than Havertz at the 9. So he's not scoring less than Marino. He's not scoring less than Eddie and Nketiah. He's not scoring less than Jesus. But is it around 15 or is it around 20, 25? I think that's what we're actually talking about here. And for a fan base, especially because the main people that are so against the Gyökeres signing are devout followers of Mikel Arteta, for them to almost discount the idea that Mikel is also pushing for the signing. So either you're saying that Mikel and the club in its entirety are making a mistake, or you believe that Mikel can get the best out of this player. This is Mikel signing. This will go down as a Mikel signing. And this is why I also want to make sure that we're not being disingenuous here, because what I fear is happening is if we don't win anything, they will blame the Gyökeres signing and blame it on Berta, when in fact, Ornstein has said that Arteta is pushing for it to get done. He would not be on the list. We would not be pushing to get it done if Arteta has not signed off on it in some capacity. It may not have been his number 1 choice, may not have been a number 2 choice, but he's comfortable enough with Arsenal spending a good chunk of their budget on this player. So he must feel that he's a good enough coach to tweak his system and get the best out of this player. There's not going to be any excuses. There's no way we're going to be able to, flip this around on a 180 and make it seem as though Berta set Mikel up for failure. He has to feel like he can get the best out of this player. And if you are a devout Mikel Arteta defender, you should also feel like Mikel can get the best out of this player. And the best out of this player is not going to be somebody that scores less goals than Eddie Nketiah, that scores less goals than Gabriel Jesus, that scores less goals than Marino, that scores less goals than Kai Havertz. What we're talking about is it 15 goals or is it 25? What is it going to be? And I feel like there's such a dramatic, divisive, binary way of thinking about this that he's either going to bang or flop. I think it's actually more of a 10-goal split. Is he going to be more of an Ollie Watkins or is he going to be more of an Isak? What is the impact going to be? And so, yeah, you don't have to love the Gyökeres signing, but you don't have to pretend like he's going to be worse than Eddie Nketiah. When you say that he's maybe going to score 10 goals, you're telling me that he's not as good of a finisher as Gabriel Jesus. And he's one of the worst finishers along with Kai Havertz in the Premier League and has been over multiple years. So they've shown up on those lists multiple times. We're not talking about a player that's in Portugal scoring, 15, 20 goals. He's scoring like fucking 40, so what are we talking about here? I also think that Gyökeres suffers from aesthetic bias, that he's rough around the edges. There's not refinement around this player. He's hardworking. He reminds me more of like a Vardy type of player, where he's not aesthetically pleasing to the eye whatsoever, but he's a fucking menace. He is a nuisance, and he's somebody that's going to get under the skin of a defender. Is he perfect? No. Is he necessarily like skillful or slick? No. But he does suffer from aesthetic bias. Sesko looks much better on the eye, and so does Isak. Gyökeres is rough, but Does that really matter at this stage? I think Arteta has kind of shown us that he's not really worried about the aesthetics around a player. We're pretty hard to watch at times, but I think he's more concerned about efficiency. And so he's a player that can give us more efficiency in and around the box, somebody that's going to be able to take penalties consistently and well. He's somebody that's also going to add free kick, expertise because he scores from dead ball scenarios. And he's somebody that's going to help us on the press as well. And hopefully, with those high turnovers, our rate of being able to score when we press teams into mistakes will be a lot higher. Because I just don't see him missing sitters like Kai Havertz does. I don't see him missing the chance that, Kai missed against Man City or what he missed against Manchester United and Newcastle. And those are the differences between us winning or not. It's really about that extra 2 to 5% with Arsenal. And can he add that? Absolutely. But this whole he's just going to bomb and I'm just so worried he's only going to score 10 goals feels very, very, very disingenuous and icky. It feels like you're more concerned about Sesko coming in because he's going to allow Havertz to continue to start and also give an excuse, and bringing in somebody like Gyökeres really does kind of threaten Kai Havertz's spot, but also puts more pressure on Mikel to make it work tomorrow, right now. He has to be able to make this signing work. It's his signing at the end of the day. May not be his first choice, but he has backed it to a certain extent. Enough where Berta would feel comfortable pushing this deal over the line. So there's no way to wiggle around it. If you're trying to find an excuse or you're trying to have your get out of jail free card, if we don't win something, it's not going to work this time. Got to make it work. A player that scored 40 goals or something like that in Portugal is a player that we should feel confident is going to score between 15 to 20 goals in our system for Arsenal Football Club, one of the best teams in the Prem, by the way. So it's just, I do get the concerns and I have them, which I've already said. But I think we're more kind of talking about, is it 15 or 25 goals, not he's going to score 10 or be worse than Nketiah or Jesus or Havertz. We have some of the worst finishers in the Premier League. You're giving them way too much credit and you're being way too harsh on Gyökeres, I feel. So somewhere between there.